à la réunion numéro 17 du Comité permanent des anciens combattants de la Chambre des communes. Le comité se...
Welcome to the 17th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. The committee is meeting to study suicide prevention among veterans.
Trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to suicide and grief. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences. For a Member of Parliament, it is important to recognize that these are difficult discussions. Also, for our witness, if you do not feel comfortable at any point, please let us know. We can pause our committee for you. Pour garantir le bon déroulement de la réunion, j'aimerais transmettre...
To ensure that the meeting runs smoothly, I would like to give a few instructions to both the witnesses and the members. Before speaking, please wait for me to call you. If you participate by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please ensure that you're on mute when you are not speaking.
Selection the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Je vous rappelle que toutes les observations des députés...
I would remind you that all comments from witnesses and members must be made through the chair.
Our witness, so as an individual, Mr. James Grant, emergency medical responder. From the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, Dr. Allison Crawford, psychiatrist and chief medical officer, 988 Suicide Crisis Helpline, who's joining us through video conference. The Veterans Hunters Canada, Mr. Todd Heisey, Chief Executive Officer and Founder. From the Dallaire Institute for Children, Peace and Security, Dr. Shelley Whitman, Executive Director, and Catherine Reeves. Each witness and each organization represented at this meeting will be giving 5 minutes for deliver their opening remarks, and once all witnesses have spoken, we will proceed to a round of questions with the members of the committee. So I will invite Mr. James Grant. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I served just 3 years in the Canadian Army and was given a 3B medical release for a serious injury sustained while on course. The incident report was written up, and it became the basis of what I consider to be a life sentence of delay, deny, and hope you will die. The premise of this is found upon the impact of the new Veterans Charter from 2005, which creates 2 classes of veterans, and how VAC has chosen to implement the Charter with very little oversight, accountability, resulting in repeated human rights violations. This horrible mistreatment we face from Veterans Affairs, which is sometimes malicious in nature, is by far the single greatest preventable factor in undermining the mental health of veterans who have been medically released. 90% of my own mental health struggles are caused by Veterans Affairs Canada, the system and its consistent human rights violations that the Charter seems to facilitate, and a total lack of accountability when Veterans Affairs staff make asinine decisions that greatly complicate our lives and violate our rights. I believe the Veterans Affairs system is broken and needs immediate effort to change its internal culture to do better to support those veterans whose mental health issues have been taken them to consider suicide as a method of resolving that pain. For myself, the 2 greatest factors in preventing my own suicidality is the fact that I'm a single parent of a 17-year-old and that I have a dog who is not a service dog due to some bureaucratic technicalities, but he nevertheless upholds that position as my honorary service dog. This serious issue of therapy dog versus a service dog is one of the many examples of the intransigence demonstrated by Veterans Affairs. This has caused serious consequences I have to live with, but Veterans Affairs doesn't have to live with. My dog is now too old to be trained as a service animal, and VAC is completely apathetical to their own problem they've caused by these delays. Please explain to me why my rights as a veteran are subject to the political whims of whoever happens to be in government versus the spirit of the applicable legislation, which compels government to do for those who have served this country honorably. Make no mistake, veterans are the most marginalized people in our society. We are the only people who can have our rights trampled on and have had our rights trampled on repeatedly with no political consequences. We are a G7 country, yet to us, it appears the government is more concerned about providing aid to third world countries than those who served this country in conflict zones, experiencing death and destruction, returning home changed, hurt, seeking assistance, only to receive Veterans Affairs methodology of delay, deny, and hope you will die. When we believe Canadian people could not care less about our veterans, the government and the Ministry of Veterans Affairs has no respect for our rights, making us feel forgotten and defeated, not defeated by our enemies, we're defeated by our own government, who authorized those deployments. This manifests itself in an increased desire to end that pain, and the easiest way to end that pain is for increasing number through suicide. Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae wrote in his poem In Flanders Fields, a message, "If ye break faith with us who die," a message VAC routinely tramples on by their own policies and approach to dealing with veterans is a broken faith between Canada and its warriors, both past and present. The final line also includes, "We shall not sleep." And this shows the government serves as a major disgrace to the memory of the 118,000 Canadians who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant, and thank you for your service, sir, and your courage for being here this morning. I would like now to invite Dr. Alison Crawford, who's joining us by video conference for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to appear as an expert witness in your study of suicide prevention amongst veterans. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for 988 Suicide Crisis Helpline, the national crisis line for anyone in Canada who's thinking of suicide or worried about someone they know. 988 is funded by the Government of Canada and administered by CAMH. Calls and texts are answered by trained responders based at nearly 40 crisis line partners across the country. The service is available 365 days a year, 24/7, by phone or text in English and French. 988 provides easy access to life-saving support for anyone experiencing a suicide-related crisis, no matter where they are in Canada. Since its launch 2 years ago, November 2023, 988 responders have spent over 18.5 million minutes answering calls and texts in which they assess for suicide risk, listen with compassion, and help the person on the other end of the line to find ways to cope and keep themselves safe. To ensure that anyone who needs help knows where to call, we've also been promoting 988 across Canada, and awareness of the service continues to grow. In addition to the federal government and partners who deliver this service, we've worked closely with provincial and territorial governments on 988 since before the launch. We've also engaged and collaborated with people from a number of priority populations to inform the development and delivery of the service, including how we train responders. So anyone who calls 988 can access specialized support. For those under 18 years of age or for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, they have the option to select specialized service that will connect them with one of our partners who support suicide prevention in those populations. Our work on 988 is aligned with the federal framework for suicide prevention. And what I want to do is just briefly outline how 988 might relate to the mental health and suicide prevention needs of veterans. So first, although we don't have a formal integration with Veterans Affairs, since 988 launched in November 2023, we've documented 345 calls and texts from veterans. And that's likely a significant underestimate since callers and texters are free to share as much or as little of their personal identification as they wish. And the second thing I just want to touch upon is what we can learn from 988 and Veterans Crisis Line services in the United States. So in the US, the Veterans Crisis Line is the dedicated support for veterans, and that has been connected to the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline, which is the US version of 988, since 2022. Veterans can dial a special 9881 veteran extension to specifically reach out to the Veterans Crisis Line for help. That service provides mental health and suicide prevention support to veterans and their families, and can connect the caller with local resources, including specific supports and health benefits for veterans. The Veterans Crisis Line in the US has had about 3.8 million interactions, calls, texts, and chats from 2021 to 2024, and that's about 2,600 interactions each day. And that volume has increased each year with a 30% growth over the last 3 years. And it's integration with the 988 service that's responsible for a large proportion of that growth. More than 1,000 crisis responders are required to meet that need in the United States. Responders are trained in crisis intervention and military culture, with unique needs identified for female veterans and culturally diverse veterans. Evaluation of the service has demonstrated an impact on engaging veterans in mental health services, on increasing uptake of means safety precautions, and reducing distress. So in conclusion, given the suicide prevention and crisis needs of veterans, 988 presents an opportunity for strengthening suicide prevention supports for veterans. We know veterans are already accessing the 988 service. We've also identified training needs for 988 responders to provide support that is affirming of military cultures. Work undertaken in the US and partnership between 988 and the US Veterans Crisis Line, I think, demonstrates the real potential of collaboration here in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crawford. We will now invite from the Veterans Hunters Canada, Mr. Todd Heisey, Chief Executive Officer and Founder.
Good morning. My sincere thanks to the members of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs for inviting me to speak today. Suicide prevention is at the crux of what the Veteran Hunters was designed to do. In order to tell the story of the Veteran Hunters, I must first take you on my mental health journey. I'm a graduate of the Royal Military College and served as an infantry officer with Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry from 1991 to 2001, and then again from 2007 to 2013. I have deployed 3 times overseas to Bosnia, Kosovo, and Russia. My post-traumatic stress injury from my Kosovo tour in 1999 was diagnosed in 2001 by a Canadian Armed Forces medical officer as part of my voluntary release process, but it was kept hidden from me for 15 years, as this portion of my medical records was redacted. It was also while awaiting my voluntary release that I contemplated suicide. I continued to feel alone, unappreciated for my 10 years of service and multiple deployments, my skill set underutilized. I was disconnected, abandoned, and betrayed by my fellow officers and the chain of command. I barely received a mention at morning coffee on my last day of service in 2001. Over the next 5 years, while trying to work as a civilian and as a reservist, I was passionately frustrated to continue to feel alone, abandoned, and betrayed by my coworkers. In those 5 years, I worked for 5 different oil and gas companies. As an unfortunate side effect from going untreated for 11 years, my 3 children all have generational trauma. Thankfully, God had other plans for me. In 2007, I returned to full-time service with the Canadian Army and served again in various roles until my voluntary release in 2013. I entered treatment for my post-traumatic stress injury in 2012, but it was not until 2016 before my medical records were unredacted and I was given a retroactive medical release. From 2012 to 2018, I proceeded to complete 6 years of treatment, a Master's of Science, and was eventually placed on DEC because of the severity of my PTSI. While in treatment, I did not have another veteran to walk with me through my journey. I had my wife, my parents, my church, my psychologist, but no veteran whom I could call my brother. I sought solace in nature and began to hunt again, taking up bow hunting, as I found it reinforced the grounding and mindfulness techniques I was learning at the OSI clinic. Being outdoors and hunting helped me immensely as I began to use the same skills I had learned to hunt another human, but now I was hunting a far superior animal, elk. I once again felt that I had a purpose and meaning again. It didn't matter whether I harvested an animal, it was all about the experience outdoors. The scientific term for what I was feeling is urgent biophilia, the innate instinct for humans to seek out nature in times of crisis. It was upon being placed on DEC in 2018 and the suggestion of the OSI clinicians that I volunteer my time that my wife Patricia and I decided to start the Veteran Hunters to help other veterans through their mental health journey. The name, the Veteran Hunters, is a dual meaning as we are actively hunting for veterans to connect them with their brothers and sisters. The Veteran Hunters Canada Limited is a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization comprised of hosts who are retired Canadian Armed Forces veterans and first responders, who themselves have gone through their own mental health journeys. Our goal is to serve our fellow veterans, military members, first responders, and spouses by providing peer support, therapy, and building community through hunting and fishing. We are the only organization of our kind in Canada, not only for the means of therapy we use, but also for the fact that all of our participants are led by a peer, either a veteran or a first responder who has experienced similar trauma and has been on the same mental health journey. Since 2019, we have put over 435 participants in the field, with volunteers today in 7 provinces, as well as a ladies-specific program, which includes spouses. We received no government funding for our 4 outdoor programs, nor for our 12-week faith-based Reboot Trauma Recovery program for veterans, first responders, and their families. We are also resourced with chaplains who are church pastors and support us and our members as they need to. Our chaplains are better resourced and more responsive to the needs of veterans than VAC. Additionally, we assist veterans in navigating Veterans Affairs, ensuring they have awareness of the benefits available to them and encouraging them to persevere through the process. Unfortunately, I am expertly skilled to assist veterans in finding their way through Veterans Affairs. I spent an initial 6 years in treatment while simultaneously completing a Master's of Science as part of my rehabilitation and retraining program. I've attended 3 hearings for physical injuries, endured 15 years before being treated for my post-traumatic stress, underwent an extensive multi-year D&D administrative review and ministerial for my change of release from the Canadian Armed Forces to a medical release, and most recently, 5 years of trying to get my DEC pay rates corrected as I was being underpaid. This required ministerial intervention and resulted in two more years of additional therapy. How many Canadians do you know that could endure this much, especially when it takes, on average, 8 years before a veteran is ready to acknowledge they need help? Without a community supporting them, no one could. Building community, as we, the Veteran Hunters, are, is one solution to suicide prevention in veterans and first responders. In Matthew 22:37-39, Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Our focus is clear. Follow the commandments set forth in these verses and build community by loving our brothers and sisters. When we build community, veterans and first responders feel loved, appreciated, cared for, have purpose and meaning again, and they will not feel the loneliness and be plagued by the evil thoughts to commit suicide. Sebastian Younger, war correspondent and author of The Tribe, remarked in Why Veterans Miss War that Afghanistan veterans didn't miss combat. They missed being part of something bigger. Knowing you matter. Mattering to the brothers around you. That's what we provide at the Veteran Hunters. We connect, empower, and love. If you are serious about suicide prevention, you need to immediately change the culture in VAC. A culture that over the last few years has far too often promoted MAID to veterans who are simply asking for help. In September of this year, someone associated with our organization was offered MAID by their case manager. This is unacceptable. Additionally, rapid advancement of claim processing using AI needs to be implemented. And lastly, VAC needs to provide more support to veterans' food banks and the services they offer. In closing, the willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, is directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heisey. And on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service and for everything that you're doing in helping our veterans community. I would like now to turn the floor for 5 minutes to the Dallaire Institute for Children, Peace and Security, Dr. Shelley Whitman and Catherine Reeves, for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to all of you today, and I want to especially thank my co-panelists for their service as well. Also, I'd like to thank MP Wagenthal for the opportunity to be here today. Canada's veterans are experiencing high levels of psychological distress and suicide risk. A major contributor is moral injury. This remains insufficiently understood or addressed within CAF and VAC systems. Moral injury is not limited to institutional betrayal. It is also an operational risk, especially during deployments where CAF personnel encounter children in armed conflict. Our organization was founded by Lieutenant General retired Romeo Dallaire, former UN Force Commander of the Assistance Mission for Rwanda from 93 to 94. He confronted the unthinkable, children recruited and used to commit atrocities. General Dallaire suffered moral and operational stress injuries that led to his own personal challenges with suicide ideation. The Dallaire Institute is the result of his lifelong commitment to destigmatize mental health disorders among veterans and end the recruitment and use of children worldwide. Our organization adopts a dual lens approach to this mandate by prioritizing the protection of children while also understanding the significant operational impacts upon defense and security sector actors. Moral injury emerges when personnel face events that violate deeply held beliefs about what is right and wrong, identity and duty. Encounters with children create profound moral conflict that persists long after deployment. Moral injury is distinct from PTSD, but the two are interconnected. It often presents as guilt, shame, existential distress, loss of trust, and social withdrawal. Persistent moral injury without support is strongly associated with increased suicide risk. While our research focuses on moral injury stemming from encounters with children, the findings we hope to share today are important for the wider prevalence of moral injury amongst service members and veterans, and for the wider prevention of suicide. The impacts of moral injury often extend to family members who report noticing moral injury-related changes as soon as their loved ones return home. This often leaves family members carrying additional burdens and becoming responsible for organizing the care and support of the veterans. This includes the children of those veterans. Children of morally injured veterans have shared statements such as, "The longer he was home, the more sick he became." And they have expressed a deep lack of support for themselves and expressed a desire to have support from Veterans Affairs Canada towards them as well. Veterans across trades report receiving no meaningful training on how to interact with children in armed conflict, no scenarios, no doctrine, no guidance, or rules of engagement or cultural context. CAF members consistently described entering operations blind to the complexity of child involvement in conflict, leading to preventable psychological harm. Encounters with children occur in every type of deployment, not only in combat. From engineers to medics to MPs and padres, all described significant exposure. And this is despite Canada being a co-collaborator of the 2017 Vancouver Principles on Peacekeeping and the Prevention of the Recruitment and Use of Child Soldiers. Our inconsistency domestically to ensure we practice what we preach globally is a challenge. Veterans are frequently unaware of the supports made available to them after release, especially in cases of moral injury, which are often less understood or recognized. Moral injury is not simply an individual veteran's problem, it is a systemic issue. Veterans participating in our research articulated thoughts such as, "I'm not broken, I was part of a system that failed to protect me." As other witnesses have discussed, a whole-of-system approach is needed for both moral injury support and suicide prevention. If active service members are unaware of moral injury as an operational risk of their deployment, the knowledge and support gap often carries over to life after service. Suicide prevention is a complex endeavor that requires sustained collaboration between CAF, DND, and VAC to ensure support across veterans and their families' lives during and after service. We also reiterate other witnesses' calls for meaningful peer-to-peer support to occur. Research funding is not an optional issue. There are significant research gaps in tracking exposure to children in armed conflict, moral injury diagnosis and treatment, long-term mental health impacts on families, and effective training and policy models. Therefore, VAC-funded research is an essential avenue to fill these gaps and must be sustained. However, the important piece is effective knowledge mobilization is the key to real and sustained change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Whiteman. On this, we will open the floor to our question. Each of the member will have 6 minutes, and unfortunately, if they pass that time, I will have to interrupt. So I just want to prepare our witnesses and our Member of Parliament. So Mr. Richard, for 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, and to our veterans with us today, thank you for your service. I'll start with you, Mr. Heisey. You mentioned that someone involved in your program was offered by a caseworker at Veterans Affairs MAID in September of this year.
That is correct, September of this year.
So the government claims that they put a stop to this about 3 years ago and that there was only 4 veterans that it occurred to. Do you believe that? I mean, clearly there was one in September of this year. It can't be.
I'm aware of, additionally to this one, probably like 6 other veterans across the country that have been offered MAID. One that I'm aware of in Newfoundland accepted MAID on the condition that he received $300,000 for his family on his passing. Another one of my participants attended that funeral. And we keep notes and we record all our conversations with VAC because we have to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and these were people. They weren't seeking MAID or interested in MAID. They were interested in help to live their lives. And
exactly.
Yeah.
This one participant in our program who came forward to me, who told me about the event in September. She was just calling to have a discussion with her case manager about ongoing treatment, and now it's to the point where that person does not trust Veterans Affairs and is seeking assistance through our chaplains program within our own organization.
Well, it's I'll just use the word sad that is occurring, and I hope that what's been heard here today and through other witnesses at this, that the government will finally admit that this hasn't been put to a stop and get an independent investigation going and get it solved and stopped once and for all. So thank you for highlighting that. Mr. Grant, you mentioned about some technicalities that you had in terms of, being able to have your trauma dog or therapy dog, whatever you want to, considered a service dog. Is that government bureaucracy that's a challenge, or what's the technicalities?
How do I turn this on?
You're good. Yeah, you're on.
The issue was more about I sought the BC SPCA to adopt my dog, and then I went to Veterans Affairs and said what type of assistance, how, the logistics behind that. And at the time, I had not yet been diagnosed with my PTSD, so that was an obvious barrier. And then once that did happen, only 2 years later, the delays, the denies, And by the time the conversation turned into, yes, we can possibly do this, well, now my dog is at the latter stage of its life. So what's the point?
Got it. So this really does come down to the delays and denials that we often hear about from veterans. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It should be a lot easier to get that help and to get the services and supports you need. But maybe I'll turn to Dr. Crawford. You mentioned, I think it was you said 345 veterans that have utilized your service since the 988 began. I assume there's a need for more veteran-specific resources, but I also am well aware that there are many, we'll call them peer support type of programs out there. Boots on the ground would be an example of that, where, we often hear from veterans that the need to have someone who understands what they're dealing with. And, we can teach someone somewhat cultural competencies, but obviously if they can work with someone who's been through what they've been through, it's the best way we can do it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that better partnerships with organizations that are already doing these things in terms of, peer support and ensuring that the resources are there, that people that have actually dealt with the same things that those who are calling have dealt with?
Absolutely. I think we need multiple sources of support, and probably most importantly, we need collaboration and integration across those resources. We know that 988 is listed on the Veterans Mental Health portion of the Government of Canada website in a large yellow box. And so we know that some veterans are being directed there, but people, when they call or text 988, they have the option of providing information. So we know 345 people have offered information, but probably many other people have called and have not offered that. Around peer support, we've also done pilot work. We've worked a lot with public safety personnel, so not including military or veterans, and have quite successfully collaborated with Boots on the Ground and other partners that offer peer support. So I think there are ways that services can be joined together to provide a full range of supports.
Would that make a good recommendation for this committee that we encourage more of that?
Yeah, definitely more collaboration and also individual choice. Different people for various reasons may want a peer provider and some people may not. So I think choice is also important, but being able to access that at a single source so that people aren't bumping around the website or having to go to multiple areas for support.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. I don't have much time left, but I'll give as much as I can to two of you mentioned the need for more supports for families, Mr. Heisey, and I think it was Dr. Witt. Real briefly, I guess, can you give us your thoughts on that? What's needed there? Sorry, there isn't more time. But.
Just say 10 seconds, sir.
Yes, especially with generational trauma. I was diagnosed with moral injuries and went undiagnosed for a number of years, and my children have aspects of post-traumatic stress as a result of that. So, yes. Thank
you very much, Mr. Heisey and Mr. Richards. There'll be another round of questions. That's the good news. Mr. Casey, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start with Mr. Heisey. Heisey?
Heisey.
I expect that you're aware that medical assistance in dying, counseling medical assistance in dying has never been and never will be a practice or a policy of the Government of Canada. You have indicated that you know of 6 people who have been offered medical assistance in dying. The Government of Canada wants to investigate that and make sure that these that to the extent that these instances are substantiated, that they are dealt with because they are completely contrary to government policy. If there is anything that you can do, sir, to urge the sources of this information to come forward to anyone on this committee, to the Minister's office, to the Ombuds's office, please do. We want to know, we want to investigate it, we want to get to the bottom of it. If it is an indicator of a more systemic problem than what we know about, we want to deal with it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and other veterans would be happy to, such as a gentleman by the name of Mark Meinke, who's done some serious independent investigative journalism on this topic. And in fact, there's one veteran out there who's no longer allowed to talk about this because he's sued the government and has received compensation and has signed an NDA. So I think there are members of your government and the public service that are well aware that this is happening, and you need to be talking to them. It's not necessarily a political party issue. This is a public service of Canada issue where you have members of your public service who are Canadians who are trying to push harm on other Canadians, and be more than happy to cooperate with anybody on these investigations. But I tell you, Mr. Meinke is probably one of the most knowledgeable veterans in this country on this topic and has done a number of podcasts on it.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Crawford, I want to pick up where Mr. Richards left off, your testimony with respect to the practices in the United States and the opportunity for collaboration. I really think is something that we should pursue. So you identified, one of the things that you identified in your opening statement was around training needs. So I guess two parts to my question. What can we do in terms of the training needs that are required, and what would be your advice to this committee in terms of learning from and adopting the best practices in the United States experience?
Thank you. So two things. In the U.S., because they collaborate with Veterans Affairs, when veterans dial the 9881 extension, they get a specialized responder. So sometimes that may be peers, that may be people who've had training in what we call cultural safety, or the ability to know the values, preferences, and needs of unique populations, in this case, veterans. So that integration allows that in the United States. In Canada, anyone who calls or texts 988 can get any responder. The technology allows people to be routed as close to home as possible. So the training that we would need to provide in this case, unless we had a specialized service, is just to ensure that responders feel equipped to appreciate and understand the beliefs, the values, and the needs of who they're talking to. And we know that this is possible because we've done, again, some work with public safety personnel and have taken steps so that responders identify or do their best to identify when someone is calling from one of those professions or backgrounds. And we provide training through 988 about what some of those needs and preferences might be, and some of the unique issues or themes that may come up in trying to provide compassionate response and ways to listen, really. So I think that training is twofold, either specialized for veterans and then general training for any responder who may interact with a veteran.
We had some fascinating testimony from some experts in Australia earlier in this study, and they provided basically a laundry list of, if you will, upstream solutions or upstream issues before people get to 988. Can you offer some insight in your experience or the experience of those answering the phone in terms of where are the potential wins in terms of upstream solutions?
Yeah, so it is true that 988 is a crisis service, and ideally there needs to be a continuum of mental health resources and responses, not just waiting until someone is in a crisis. But we do know that if you are in a crisis and you contact a service like 988, that support can in fact be life-saving. My my knowledge and focus is really on that crisis point. But we need a full range. Oh, sorry, apologies, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Crawford, we will come back to you. We'll have another round. For our witnesses, Madame Gaudreau will address in French, so I will strongly encourage each of you to have your earpiece and making sure that you have a volume high enough so Mrs. Gaudreau is not in a position where she cannot, have conversation with you. So just make sure that it's to a certain level. Madame Gaudreau pour 6 minutes.
6 minutes, Ms. Gaudreau. Is it working okay for you? Yes? Good. Thank you for taking the time and for coming here. Madam Chair, this is our last meeting before we submit our recommendations for the report. My comment is for all of you. I will begin. Mr. Grant, to begin with. What do we need to do in order to obtain services? You asked that question, correct? Yes. Yes. That's not exactly what my question is. The answer is yes, so I'm going to answer you. The answer is what you're doing right now. Being here, being present, providing us with recommendations, information. That's the first step. The second step, and once we have the report and brought together all of the different recommendations, we will send it to appropriate parties. And the third step, this report should not be put on the shelf. What do we do to do this? Earlier I heard that 118,000 Canadians who have served, and what makes me most sad is that you're here because you have called out for help. But in order for you to get this assistance, all of the assistance that you need, the help you need, you have to really make a lot of noise. You have to get things going. But there's something that's positive about this, because to have yourselves heard, it takes some synergy. You need to work together, and you are comrades, brothers in arms. And I'm convinced that all my colleagues would agree with me on this, because everything is important. It's almost like we have an elephant that we have to eat in little pieces, take off little bites. But you've been neglected for far too long. So I'm telling you that once we have all of the information gathered, coast to coast to coast, the CAF, the RCMP, the community, if you're prepared, if you're ready, we'll march forward, ensure that your rights are respected, so that there will be no reason to cut back on budgets and put a limit on services. I see you, I hear you, and I know that there are veterans that have received excellent service, but those that go through the cracks, that's one person too many. Maybe that answered your question a little bit. I'm going to continue with Ms. Crawford. 2,600 interactions per day. I'm glad to hear that. Moreover, when my colleague said that it was posted on the site, what are people saying? Oh, I didn't know we had this number, this 981. Or is it systematic, or is the information getting out there well?
Thank you for your question. That is a huge focus of 988 right now, and we have a communications plan. We also work closely with the Public Health Agency of Canada that has a communications team, and we have population level ads that go to everybody, and that's TV, television, radio, in your community. And then we also increasingly are doing more targeted ads. So, that's another possibility to do targeted ads for specific populations. For example, we know that we need to attract more men um, to rely on a service and come forward for help. And that may be another possibility to do more targeted advertising that 90-day is relevant for veterans. The proviso to that is we need to make sure that the service is specialized to meet those needs before we advertise that.
Mais en terminant, la principale publicité.
But to conclude, the main advertising is to announce this service to all regions throughout Canada. I'm convinced that you do this, but for people who are listening to us, I'm hoping that there's nobody that says, oh, I didn't even know we had that service. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Gaudreau.
Thank you, Ms. Gaudreau. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Grant, in your opening statement, you mentioned that human rights violations were being committed by the Government of Canada, by VAC. And then in the opening round by Mr. Casey addressed Mr. Hisey about the veterans that you're aware of that have been offered MAID. We have studied in this committee numerous times where the term sanctuary trauma comes up. So to have Mr. Casey ask for you to bring forward people and names who are suffering from sanctuary trauma, do you believe that veterans who have been offered MAID will actually trust this government and come forward and testify?
Some will, some won't, because a number of us have already been targeted specifically by Veterans Affairs. I'll use myself as an example. Case manager once contacted me, gave me very disheartening news about they were going to claw back $180,000 in benefits from me. And discussing with her, she actually told me that she was specifically told to target me in this fact. My emails between she and I were actually completely removed from my insecure inbox with Veterans Affairs. And then this started basically a 2.5-year struggle for me with Veterans Affairs in this whole $180,000, where the most recent past minister prior to the election got involved, and she sided to my benefit in this case. So that's the reason why some of these veterans won't come forward, because they know they're going to be targeted. There have been witnesses here who have said that they've been followed, they've been surveilled. That happens.
Okay, so we've got Veterans Affairs committing human rights violations. Mr. Grant, I'd like for you to expand on that. We've got veterans being targeted and threatened to have their benefits being taken away. Is that clear? Is that my
correct.
understanding? Mr. Grant, do you have any comments on that?
My colleague to the left here pretty much hit the nail on the head. I don't have a lot to expand on that, but in my experience with the new Veterans Charter creating 2 classes of veteran, in my opinion, that violates Section 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Okay, I don't disagree with you. In your testimonies, you talked about generational trauma. You talked about your children. And Mr. Grant, you talked about being a single father, and I can identify with that. Could you please explain to me what that looks like and how your children are dealing with that. How have you been able to cope with that? Have they come to you, or did you have to, over time, recognize, because you're dealing with your own mental health issues, how have you been able to actually deal with your children? Because I'd like to kind of go to Dr. Whitman afterwards, after this question. Okay, I've got a minute here, so.
In my case with my 3 children, we identified, as I was going through my 6 years of trauma treatment, we were able to identify that they had certain aspects of my own post-traumatic stress symptoms. They themselves each had about three of my 6 symptoms, and they were different amongst each of my 3 children.
Okay. Ms. Whitman, can I get a bit of a testimony from you with regards to generational trauma and what you're dealing with, how you deal with it?
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to raise is that there are no supports for children in these instances. There's been efforts focused on spouses, but not on the children specifically. It's unfortunate we didn't have more time because my colleague to my right here is someone who is a survivor of that and is specializing in that in her PhD research right now.
Thanks, Ms. Reeves. Mr. Hissey, I just want to end off. You talked about your faith. Have you ever felt that you've been persecuted for your faith?
Yes or no, sir?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate. Thank you. Mr. Clark, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I actually wanted to turn my questions to Dr. Whitman and Ms. Reeves as well, so that's a good segue. Just wanted to start by saying quickly, I'm a Dal graduate myself, a Nova Scotia MP, so I'm very proud of the fact that the Dallaire Institute is headquartered at Dal, and it's done and continues to do amazing work in our province and across the world, really. So thank you for that. So perhaps, Dr. Whitman, if you wanted to just finish your thought, you were talking about generational trauma, and then Ms. Reeves, if you wanted to touch on the work that you're doing, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for that opportunity. So yes, at the Dallaire Institute, we work around the globe, and we work with military and police and training them on how to interact with children in armed conflict. And what we have found is that the impacts of those interactions that those particular service members have when they encounter children in armed conflict and then come back home has an impact on the next generation as well. And yet there is hardly any research done on this particular issue or the supports to the children. And so if you allow me, I'd like to give my colleague a moment to respond to that.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to respond. I reiterate that the encountering of children is uniquely morally injurious, and many children that I've talked to through my research talk about how parents come home and can, in some ways, no longer parent, that they come home and they can't hold their children or look them in the eye because of the children they saw while deployed. And this is often not addressed on any level. The veterans are not asked about these encounters, and the children have no opportunity to come forward. My research has predominantly involved adult children who have slightly more agency to talk about their experiences. And what they tell me is they are deeply disappointed in the way that VAC offers support to families. Once they turn 18, they are largely forgotten about and not considered as a military-connected family member anymore. And for many of these children, having to support their parent becomes the center of their household and experiences. So it isn't until they are past 18 and able to go into their own homes or have new experiences outside of being a child that they are even ready to understand the way that having a parent who has been injured by service impacts them. And at this point, it is already too late. There is no support from VAC. There is no funding. They are left to civilian providers who have no training on military cultural competency and are also unwilling to ask these challenging questions.
Thank you for that. It's a really really important point that you raise, and over the course of this study, which we're wrapping up today from a witness standpoint, I think as we start to think about reports and recommendations and so on, the issues around families and spouses, we've heard from spouses, children as well, equally important in many ways to make sure that they have support to help themselves and help veterans, right? Hopefully we want it to be a virtuous circle rather than the other way around. So thank you for that work that you're doing. You touched, Dr. Whitman, in your opening statement, talked about moral injury. If you could just tease out for me a little bit more the distinction there between moral injury and PTSI or PTSD, if you could just kind of touch on that a bit. Thank you.
For sure. So PTSD is a fear-based trauma response, okay? Where moral injury stems from violating one's core moral values that you may hold, right? Or experiencing profound betrayal. So there's a difference here in terms of like how it presents and how to also provide treatment. And part of a challenge that we have is that PTSD is well recognized and diagnosed, and therefore there are treatments that have been given, but they haven't been sufficient to address that moral degradation and those kind of core values. So with this, what's important to recognize is that many veterans might have both PTSD and moral injury, but the distinction and the necessity to provide adequate supports and treatments is often not there, and we need more of that to occur. Yeah, Catherine's pointing to me like a really good way to talk about this for people to understand is that PTSD, it's like people who say that they almost died, and in terms of moral injury, it's I wish I had died. So yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Madame Gaudreau. So again, make sure you have the earpiece pour 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
You have 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you. I would like you to forward the highlights of your research, particularly the description, because what I am understanding, and perhaps you have recommendations, I realize that there's some traceability that's required so that we don't forget about the veterans' children's. During the times in their lives where they need to have a check-in to ensure. Same thing applies to the veteran. So if you have any documentation, obviously we will add it to our report because we don't want to react. We want to recognize, acknowledge what is good so that we won't have any more suicides. So thank you. In the few seconds that remain, I might have a minute if you would like to complete your comments.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much for the extra time. I think the biggest desire from military-connected families is recognition, and recognition from VAC that they also in many ways have served their country and that they deserve support and awareness about the ways that they have served. And this is echoed by the desires that we have seen in participants that are veterans themselves, that their families have been deeply impacted and they see it, and they are deeply wounded and additionally injured by the lack of help that they can get their family. So addressing this is, I think, something that needs to be a big concern for many people.
Could I also just add in that I want to mention moral injury, there are preventative measures that can be taken, and that's why the training and the policy approaches and preparation beforehand could go a long way to reducing the impact of this on the next generation as well. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Our rounds of questions. To our witnesses, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today and certainly participating and engaging on this very important subject. I will now suspend so we can greet you properly. I want to wish you all Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and Happy Holiday. Merci beaucoup.